faithfully sharing value and exploring great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally with Book Insights. Today, I'm diving into this book called Ancestral Rules, written by the renowned Song Dynasty scholar, Professor Deng Xiaonan from Beijing University. In 1043, with Emperor Renzong of Song's support, Fan Zhongyan and others launched a famous reform movement known as the Qingli New Policies. Strangely, in this reform, the reformers, like Fan Zhongyang, claimed their goal was to revitalize ancestral rules. Reforms usually scrap the old for the new, but Fan Zhongyan's group wanted to restore old values. So, what exactly are ancestral rules? Why did the reformers represent ancestral rules? That's the core question this book will explore deeply. The ancestors in ancestral rules originally meant Emperor Taizu and Taizong of Song, but later included all deceased Song emperors. Ancestral rules are the institutional practices and governing spirit used by Song Dynasty emperors. The Song ruling class also called them family rules of ancestors, ancestral institutions, ancestral established laws. It was their go-to concept. Well-known Song events, like the dismissal of generals with a cup of wine, Qingli new policies, Wang Anshi's reforms, Southern Song's resistance against Jin, and even the dynasty's fall, all reflect ancestral rules. You could say many Song-era problems centered on ancestral rules. Next, I'll break this down into 3 parts on ancestral rules. Part 1, how were ancestral rules formed? Part 2, how did ancestral rules boost the political voice of scholar officials? Part 3, how did ancestral rules become a roadblock to political progress? First, let's cover Part 1, the formation of ancestral rules. Song ancestral rules weren't set by an imperial order but evolved through daily politics. In this process, 2 groups played key roles. One was the emperor, the other was scholar officials as ministers. First, how did emperors lay the groundwork? As the first 2 Song emperors, Taizong and Taizong, were crucial in establishing ancestral rules. Emperor Taizu founding ancestral rules ties closely to the Northern Song's origins. After the Tang dynasty fell, history entered the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms era. In just 54 years, 5 dynasties and 14 emperors rose in the Central Plains. Each dynasty lasted under 11 years on average, each emperor under 3 years. And back then, the elite troops directly under the central government were called the Forbidden Army. Forbidden Army commanders, wielding massive forces, frequently launched military coups to overthrow the court. In 960, Zhao Kuangyin, commander of later Zhou's Forbidden Army, initiated the Chen Chao Mutiny and founded the Song Dynasty. People at the time had no reason to believe this dynasty, born from a Forbidden Army commander's mutiny, would last 320 years. To prevent Song from becoming the 6th short-lived dynasty after the 5 dynasties, Emperor Taizu Zhao Kuangyin implemented institutional reforms. The core reform was restructuring the military command system. Within the Song's first 2 years, Tao stripped 8 top Forbidden Army generals of power in 3 phases, the last being the famous dismissal of generals with a cup of wine. Taiyu reclaimed their military authority peacefully by offering gold, silver, estates, titles, and marriage alliances. He then appointed lower-ranking, less influential men to lead the Forbidden Army. Taizu also split the original military command into 3 sections and transferred deployment authority to another office, the Bureau of Military Affairs. All these measures decentralized commanders' power to prevent coups. Besides central commanders, regional military governors called judushi were also Taizu's targets. To thwart rebellion, Taozu gradually stripped jiedushi of judicial, administrative, financial, and military powers. These precautions became foundational to Song's ancestral rules. In 976, Taizu died, and his brother, Emperor Taizong, succeeded him, elevating ancestral rules further. Taizong's extreme political caution stemmed partly from personal reasons. Taizong's succession was controversial. Rumors since Northern Song accused him of fratricide. This bred deep suspicion toward officials, exceeding Taizu's awareness. To legitimize his rule, Taizong's accession edict explicitly vowed to continue Taizu's policies, summarized as preventive measures for all affairs, detailed regulations for all matters. Meaning, guard against everything, regulate every detail to nip problems in the bud. This is exemplified by changes in the early Song's two-chancellery system. After founding Song, the central government adopted the two-chancellery system, the Secretariat Chancellery and Bureau of Military Affairs. In early Song, the Secretariat Chancellor, headed by the Chancellor, controlled both military and civil affairs. The Bureau of Military Affairs was headed by commissioners or administrators, primarily handling routine military affairs like troop deployment orders and appointing military officers. But during Emperor Taizong's reign, its role was redefined to advise on strategy and prevent usurpations, meaning guarding against threats to imperial power. Taizong aimed to use the bureau to counter all threats to his throne. Early in his reign, his brother Zhao Tingmei was a legitimate heir. Chancellor Liu Duoxun not only wielded enormous power but also maintained close ties with Zhao Tingmei, alarming Taizong. I wonder, to eliminate this threat, Taizong instructed his confidant, Cai Yushi, to falsely accuse Zhao Tingmei of plotting rebellion, leading to both men's exile and eventual deaths in despair. For this service, Cai Yushi was appointed second in command of the bureau. Later, he rose to become administrator of the bureau. Under him, the bureau secretly deployed spies to monitor officials and commoners, transforming it into an imperial surveillance tool, a previously non-existent function. So, beyond espionage, Taizong used the bureau to counterbalance the chancellor's power. Emperor Taizu had relied heavily on his confidant Zhao Pu as chancellor, consulting him on everything from reforms to military campaigns. Zhao Pu once dominated court politics, much like Liu Duoxun did early in Taizong's reign. After exiling Liu Duoxun, Taizong was determined to prevent another overpowerful chancellor. The chancellery needed checks, achieved by having the bureau share its authority. In 1986, Taizong launched the Northern Expedition against the Liu Dynasty, the Song's largest war yet. Yet the entire campaign was planned solely between Taizong and bureau officials. Chancellors lost not just military decision-making power but even access to frontline updates, all seized by the bureau. Only in Taizong's later years, with stability secured, did the bureau's prevent usurpation role fade, but its counterbalance to the chancellery became institutionalized. By 990, Taizong formally decreed, the chancellery handled civil affairs only. The bureau exclusively managed military affairs. This division of governance between two offices became ancestral rules, lasting until the Song's fall. Thus, whether consolidating power or distrusting officials, Taiyu and Taizong's precautions laid ancestral rules' foundation. Now let's examine how scholar officials shaped ancestral rules. In Song Dynasty, scholar officials were bureaucrats entering through imperial exams. Taizu's decree that chancellors must be scholars, and Taizong's expansion of the exam system greatly strengthened their influence. Emperor Zhenzong, Taizong's son, was Song's first ruler inheriting a stable realm. Burdened with preserving ancestral foundations, yet lacking his predecessor's political skill, he relied heavily on scholar officials. Against this backdrop, scholar officials played massive roles in shaping ancestral rules. The two most pivotal figures were Li Hang and Wang Dan. Li Hang was Zhenzong's tutor during his princely years, maintaining close ties. After Zhenzong's accession, Li Hang became chancellor, with the emperor heeding his counsel unquestioningly. Li Hang's first contribution was establishing scholar officials' duty to uphold ancestral institutions. Li Hang governed with deliberate stability, rejecting flippant newcomers who recklessly proposed changes undermining traditions. To Li Hang, Song institutions were already perfected. Arbitrary changes would harm society, thus strict adherence was essential. This earned high praise in Song, with Li Hong himself revered as sagely chancellor because Zhenzong's reign prioritized standardizing governance practices developed over 40 years into a calm, orderly system. This proved crucial for ancestral rules formation. Li Heng's second contribution was modeling scholar off official checks on imperial power. He meticulously guided Zhenzong's conduct, exemplified by burning the edict by candlelight, a defining incident. When Zhenzong sought to elevate his favored consort Lu by ordering Li Hong to draft the appointment edict, Li Heng burned the imperial note before the messenger, declaring, "Tell him Minister Li Heng disapproves." Song officials later emulated this, like when Empress Dowager Cao sent Chancellor Han Qi a letter during Emperor Yingzong's rocky succession, detailing political tension, Yingzong's palace misconduct while subtly suggesting his removal. After reading it, Han Qi burned the letter before the messenger and said, "The Empress Dowager always claims the emperor is unsettled. What's strange about these actions?" Clearly, Han Qi was imitating Li Heng's burning the edict by candlelight, explicitly referencing ancestral precedents. That covers Li Heng's contributions to ancestral rules. Now let's look at Wang Dan's example. He found a practical way for scholar officials to check imperial power by consciously mining political resources from ancestral precedents. In 1005, Song and Liao signed the Treaty of Chang'an. Afterwards, to prove he was the sole legitimate ruler to both nations, Zhenzong staged a series of farces involving heavenly scriptures and auspicious signs, and extravagantly held the Fenshan rituals on Mount Tai, followed by fanatical, superstitious activities. The nation's manpower and finances were rapidly depleted, to the point that the Song history commented, "The entire court acted like madmen." During this period, Wang Dan served as chancellor. Unlike Li Heng, who was the emperor's teacher, he never dared to forcefully intervene in Zhenzong's actions. However, Wang Dan still managed to correct Zhenzong's misgovernance by consciously selecting ancestral precedents as a weapon against him. At that time, people collectively called the 5 treacherous ministers 5 ghosts, with the leader urging Zhenzong to promote the heavenly scriptures. Wang Qinro. Zhenzong repeatedly wanted to make Wang Qinro chancellor, but Wang Dan prevented it. Wang Qinro was a southerner. Therefore, Wang Dan's reason was that ancestral courts had never let a southerner oversee state affairs. Another among the 5 ghosts was a eunuch named Liu Chengui, deeply favored by Zhenzong. At that time, Jidushi was a highly prestigious honorary title. Zhenzong wanted to grant it to Liu Chengui, but Wang Dan sternly said, "Your Majesty clings to ancestral precedents, yet there's no precedent for appointing a eunuch as Jidushi. Did you?" So, I cannot comply with this. Li Heng and Wang Dan's political practices added new dimensions to ancestral rules. From then on, ancestral rules not only reflected the emperor's will to rule, but also became a powerful tool for scholar officials to constrain the emperor and regulate governance. Take an example. In 1022, Emperor Zhenzong passed away, and the 13-year-old Emperor Renzong succeeded. Zhenzong's will appointed his Empress Liu as Empress Dowager to temporarily handle state affairs. Empress Dowager Liu, ruling from behind a curtain, had both political talent and ambition. To prevent another Wu Zetian, scholar officials increasingly cited ancestral precedents. Deputy Chancellor Wang Zhang even publicly declared that the realm belonged to Emperors Taizu, Taizong, and the late emperor, not your majesties, effectively warning Empress Dowager Liu not to overstep. Ultimately, Empress Dowager Liu had to position herself as an elder of the Zhao family, responsible for safeguarding the Song ancestral legacy. In 1033, after Empress Dowager Liu's death, Emperor Renzong assumed power, and scholar officials explicitly coined the concept of ancestral laws. Having witnessed this firsthand, Renzong fully embraced it, declaring ancestral laws must never be broken. Thus, the concept solidified, becoming an unshakable banner in court. All right, that concludes how ancestral laws came to be. Through emperors and scholar officials' joint efforts, ancestral laws were formally established. They profoundly shaped Song politics thereafter. This included both positive and negative impacts. Part 2 first explores ancestral laws' positive influence, specifically how they amplified scholar officials' political voice. This amplification manifested in two key ways. First, scholar officials widely invoked ancestral laws to rectify imperial missteps and steer policy. As mentioned earlier, Wang curated precedents to restrain Zhenzong. This evolved into systematized compilations called Precious Instructions and Sacred Governance. These were instructional texts summarizing Song ancestors' words and deeds for rulers. Precious instructions preserved ancestral maxims, like quotations. Sacred governance recorded their wise governance actions. Some compilations were privately authored by scholars, others officially commissioned. Regardless of origin, they aimed to craft exemplary ancestral models for stable governance. Thus, scholar officials curated and polished content for these records. For instance, after Renzong's accession, scholar Shiji compiled Sacred Governance of Three Reigns, covering Taizu, Taizong, and Zhenzong. Before presenting it to court, Shiji asked Anshi to review it. Anshi flagged unsuitable stories, including one about Tali's doting excessively on a palace maid. During morning court, an official admonished him about this. Taiyu, suddenly enlightened, had her killed while she slept after court. Anshi said, "How could such things be emulated by later generations?" So he deleted all such stories from the book. After selecting stories to compile into Precious Instructions and Sacred Governance, scholar officials would teach these to the emperor through the Jinyan lecture system, regular classes, reshaping ancestral laws. During the Yuanyo era, Fan Zhui served as imperial tutor, teaching young Emperor Zhezong, whose father was Emperor Shenzong, the reformer. Though opposed to Shenzong's reforms, Fan Zhui didn't always endorse his laws, but to encourage Shenzong's studies, he still held Shenzong up as a model. He noted that Shenzong was diligent and studious, adhering to ancestral laws, attending Jinyan lectures every other day. Building on this, Fan Zhui portrayed Shenzong as strictly following ancestral constitutions, a model for future generations. The actions of Anshi and Fan Zhui show that not everything ancestors did became ancestral laws. Only practices meeting scholar-officials' political needs were included in ancestral laws. The emperors learned ancestral laws daily, subtly influenced by scholar officials, and were constantly reminded after taking power, showing their immense influence. Well, the second way ancestral laws boosted scholar officials' political voice was by protecting their personal safety. Historians view Song governance as China's most enlightened dynasty, closely tied to ancestral laws. Legend says Emperor Taizu engraved a stela at the dynasty's founding stating, "Do not kill scholar officials and those who speak out," called the Taizu stela. Did the Taizu stela actually exist? Scholars debate its existence, but the principle of not killing scholar officials and speakers was widely seen as ancestral law. For example, Emperor Shenzong planned to execute an official after military failure, but Chancellor Kai Kui opposed it.
Kai Ke pointed out that no scholar official had been killed since ancestral times, and he didn't expect it to start with your majesty. Song then considered exiling the official, but Deputy Chancellor Zhang Dun objected, saying it would be better to kill him.
Song asked, "Why?" Zhang Dun replied, "A scholar can be killed but not humiliated." Shenzong angrily said, "Not a single satisfying thing can be done." Zhang Dun continued defiantly, "It's good such satisfying things can't be done," showing how the ancestral law protected scholar officials' safety. It was the foundation of scholar officials' security and purpose. Thus, when anyone tried to undermine this ancestral law, they faced resistance from principled scholars. Emperor Shaozong of Southern Song sought to change the enlightened political climate since Northern Song, even considering executing disgraced officials. Immediately, public outcry erupted. Chancellor Shi Hao urgently invoked the Taizu stele, using ancestral authority to force Xiaozong to retract the order. Beyond emperors, some scholar officials also advocated changing the lenient political culture, but met opposition. During Renzong's Qingli era, when a negligent local official was punished, Deputy Military Commissioner Fu Bi wanted execution, but met resistance from Deputy Chancellor Fan Zhongyan. Fan Zhongyan argued, "Since ancestral times, we've never lightly executed officials. This honors virtue. How can we undermine it? Especially when you and I lead these reforms here. How many colleagues truly share our vision? Even the emperor's resolve may waver. If we push him to execute officials recklessly, tomorrow we may face the same fate." Overall, through ancestral laws, scholar officials gained significant political voice, enabling them to better guide emperors in governance. Yet, ancestral laws had both positive and negative aspects. Part 3 examines their negative effects. First, ancestral laws plunged late Northern Song politics into turmoil. After formalization, scholar officials invoked ancestral laws in all policy debates, and emperors constantly pledged adherence. Yet as generations passed, each Song emperor eventually became an ancestor. Their practices were incorporated into ancestral laws. Some practices even contradicted each other. On one hand, ancestral authority was unassailable. On the other, conflicting precedents offered no clear guidance. This authority ambiguity, duality ultimately destabilized late Northern Song politics. Let's examine the Qingli reforms to see how ancestral laws' authority and ambiguity caused political paralysis.
In 1043, with Emperor Renzong's support, reformist scholars like Fan Zhongyan and Fu Bi launched the Qingli reforms.
In their proposal, Fan Zhongyan explicitly stated the reforms aimed to revitalize institutions created by ancestors. Fu Bi further suggested compiling the precedents of Taoyi, Taizong, and Zhenzong's reigns to guide the reforms. Fan Zhongyan's claim of revitalizing ancestral laws wasn't empty rhetoric. Take the reform limiting hereditary appointments. Song inherited this system, where officials could secure government posts for relatives. By Zhenzong's reign, it spiraled out of control. Officials exploited imperial birthdays, rituals, retirements, even deaths to secure posts for sons and protégés. This flood caused bureaucratic bloat, strained finances, and lowered governance quality. Thus, Fan Zhongyan's reforms strictly limited eligibility, genuinely reviving Taizu and Taizong's original intent. But the problem, Zhenzong, whose policies caused the excess, was now also an ancestor. Officials harmed by the reforms rejected Zhenzong's practices. They vilified Fan Zhongyan and Fu Bi for reckless changes, claiming reforms violated ancestral laws, urging Renzong to reconsider traditions and establish feasible systems. Other reform measures faced identical challenges during Qingli. Ultimately, amid opposition and slander, the reforms collapsed within 18 months. This phenomenon warrants reflection. Qingli reforms marked the beginning of deep fractures in ancestral laws. After Shenzong's reforms, these divisions intensified, destabilizing late Northern Song. From late Renzong to early Shenzong, officials fiercely criticized complacent governance, proposing reforms. Wang Anshi emerged as the leading voice. He believed overcoming Song's crises required adapting institutions to contemporary realities. Ambitious Emperor Shenzong adopted Wang's proposals, launching the new policies reforms. Implementation proved turbulent, reigniting reformist conservative clashes. In 1085, Shenzong died. Young Zhezong succeeded, with Empress Dowager Regency appointing anti-reformists who abolished the new policies. These conservatives faced an awkward reality. The deceased Shenzong was now an ancestor, and his reforms, especially contradictory ones, were part of ancestral laws. To tackle the challenge, the conservatives exploited the interpretation of ancestral laws to the extreme. Fan Ziyu is a prime example. He repeatedly submitted memorials lavishly praising Emperor Renzong, selected over 300 anecdotes from Renzong's reign, compiled them into splendid deeds of the benevolent emperor, portraying Renzong as a wise ruler who strictly upheld ancestral laws and created a golden age. Regarding Emperor Shenzong, he only emphasized Shenzong's diligence and adherence to traditions, downplaying or even avoiding the fact of his reforms. Of course, this burying one's head in the sand approach was doomed to fail. In 1093, when the Empress Dowager died, Northern Song politics reversed again, and an official named Yang Wei advised Emperor Zhezong. The institutions created by Emperor Shenzong's reforms are worthy of lasting forever. I beg to study Shenzong's core principles to inherit his legacy. Facing the conflicting sides of ancestral laws, Emperor Zhezong ultimately fully restored the new policies. Shenzong's new policies. After Zhezong's death, his successor, Emperor Huaizong, still flew the banner of reform, claiming it was Shenzong's innovative system and passing it down to us descendants. Why were Zhezong and Huizong more willing to follow Shenzong's approach? One reason. Shenzong split the chancellor's office into 3 parts to balance each other, weakening scholar officials' checks on imperial power. Imperial authority became dominant, and officials with differing views lost tolerance.
They engaged in factionalism, fighting each other to the death, becoming tools for the emperor's unilateral control.
In 1002, Huizong appointed Kai Jing of the reformist faction as chancellor, along with other sycophantic ministers. They found in Shenzong's principles ways to satisfy their own extravagance and debauchery. For example, during Shenzong's reign, Wang Anshi proposed fiscal reforms for the realm, which Shenzong approved. By Huizong's time, Haijing cited this precedent, claiming the court wasn't worried about lacking money, but about failing to manage finances, using it as justification for their exploitation. And, during Shenzong's reign, he implemented the exemption law, requiring subjects to pay exemption fees to avoid certain labor duties. Huizong also claimed to implement Shenzong's exemption law, but the fees were drastically increased, in some places over 70 times higher than in Shenzong's time. Most of this extorted wealth wasn't used to enrich the state or strengthen the military, but for Huizong, Haijing, and others, lavish lifestyles. Thus, under the guise of inheriting Shenzong's legacy, Huizong and his ministers imposed heavy taxes and acted lawlessly. Officials who didn't comply were severely exiled or lightly dismissed, and their children were restricted. The Northern Song descended into extreme corruption and darkness. In 1127, Jin troops invaded south, and the already decayed dynasty finally collapsed in the Jingkang incident. The divisions caused by ancestral laws plunged the late Northern Song court into chaos, ultimately leading to its downfall. In contrast, the Southern Song swung to the opposite extreme, rigidly adhering to ancestral laws, becoming detached from reality. Emperor Gaozong blamed Wang Anshi entirely for the Jingkang incident after establishing Southern Song. To assert legitimacy, he abandoned Shenzong's reforms and strictly followed early Northern Song precedents.
For instance, in early Southern Song, facing extinction, generals like Yue Fei and Han Shizhong repelled Jin invasions, saving half the realm. Military leaders gained unprecedented power to defend the territory.
Yet even in this crisis, scholar officials, whether surrender advocate Qin Hui, peace seeker Zhao Ding, or hawk Zhang Jun, all invoked ancestral laws to restrict these generals. This perfectly suited Gaozong's agenda. In 1141, Gaozong summoned Zhang Jun, Han Shizong, and Yue Fei to Linan, appointing them to military offices to strip their commands, soon shamelessly executing Yue Fei. This was essentially Song's second dismissal of generals with a cup of wine. But author Ding Xiaonan argues, while Taizu acted openly, Gaozong schemed in shadows. Exploiting ancestral laws cost Southern Song its chance to reclaim lost lands. The flaw of rigidly following ancestral laws was exposed from Southern Song's founding. One consequence: most scholar officials deemed ancestral laws perfect, needing no adjustment for reality. Especially in mid-late Southern Song, as Neo-Confucianism became state ideology, ancestral laws turned into moral lectures divorced from practical governance. They obsessed over emperors' moral virtue, believing good rulership alone would solve problems. In 1233, Emperor Lizong, Song's fourth to last ruler, attempted reforms. Meanwhile, the Jin dynasty fell. The Mongol Empire surged across Eurasia, military pressure mounted, and Southern Song's economy collapsed. Truly a survival crisis. To escape the ruling crisis, Emperor Lizong hired the renowned Neo-Confucian masters Zhen Deqiu and Wei Liao Wang, asking them, "What's the most urgent and important thing right now?" Zhen Deqiu and Wei Liao Wen replied that the most critical thing is distinguishing gentlemen from petty men, and to do that, you gotta fix the emperor's heart. The Neo-Confucian scholar officials, led by Zhen Deqiu, also brought up the idea of praying to heaven for eternal mandate. Praying to heaven for eternal mandate means asking heaven to keep the dynasty going forever, coming from the Confucian classic, Shanshu. As for how to pray for eternal mandate, the scholar officials listed methods like sticking to family rules and benefiting the people. Oh, cliches! The emperor wanted quick fixes for the crisis, but the scholar officials just spouted empty theories following ancestral laws. No wonder they couldn't cook up real reform solutions. Whatever sees the purge. The Southern Song elite's ideas for governing were totally tapped out. All right, that's all on ancestral laws. Let's sum it up. Ancestral laws aimed at nipping problems in the bud. They really did a huge job stabilizing and enlightening the early Song political scene, showing off the ruling class's smarts. But the authority and fuzziness of ancestral laws planted big dangers, leading to massive political chaos in late Northern Song. After that, rigidly sticking to ancestral laws in Southern Song made politics lose touch with reality, and national life got stiff. Ultimately, the Southern Song's fall was truly successful yet failed by ancestral laws. Ancestral laws are good. Ancestral laws. That's it for this book. Listening notes are below the audio. Catch you next time.